Really, it's about tenacity. It's about execution. It's about coachability of that startup. That's more important in those early stages to really grow that founder and grow that idea into the marketplace that it should go into.
Welcome to She Invests. Join us every week for conversations focused on the growing number of female angel investors, the real unicorns. You'll hear from existing female angel investors, VCs, and fund managers on their investment thesis. From deal flow to exits, they will share the best practices that contribute to their success. Female angel investors will be equipped with the tools and resources to confidently activate their capital in order to make an impact in their community and the global economy. With your host, active angel investor and founder of Hera Angels, Dr. Sylvia Ma.
So on the She Invest podcast today, we have Andrea Guendelman, and she is the amazing co-founder and CEO of BeVisible.soy, professional network for U.S. Latina millennials. But Andrea has an incredible past that she brings all that to leverage onto this new startup that she created. And Andrea attended Harvard Law School, and she was a lawyer in several large law firms in New York City and worked in Washington, D.C., and has just been a big advocate in promoting Latina education and entrepreneurship through her work in, let's say, not-for-profits, such as the Center for Advancement of Hispanics in Science and Engineering Education, and then as a lawyer and also back in Washington, D.C. So you've been everywhere, and we love that you are part of this podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I want to dive in. I really wanted to invite you onto the podcast because you are the ideal for me in that aspiring angel investor who cares about community, who cares about connections, and who's building an empire right now. So I love that you have created BeVisible. And what is BeVisible all about, and why did you create it?
Well, thank you for the question. BeVisible is a professional network for Latinx. We call it Latinx, but it's really these Latino millennials, Generation Y and Generation Z, really, and a little bit of Generation X. So it's a professional network for Latinos because I knew that Latinos in this country were not accessing the networks that feed the innovation economy. And the reason they were not accessing those networks is because they kind of were networking in a different way. They were staying within the community, family, kind of not integrating as much. I sort of unpacked that, and why was that is because, most of the Latinos are first-generation college students, and they come from families without professional networks. So they haven't been offered a lot of guidance on career by parents. And they also tend to go to schools, state schools, or even private schools without great alumni networks, particularly Latino alumni networks. And since they're very connected to cultural roots, they still prefer to network in that family environment, community environment. So we knew we needed to create a different model from the LinkedIn where, people measure themselves by the number of connections and the resume. But instead, we had to create something where people could invest in each other's success and create community and a space of upward mobility. And that's what we've done. And we paved the way to millennial engagement. And today we have almost 10,000 users in the platform.
Wow, what a great success story. And that's building that culture that they really need to connect.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So I know that we talked a little bit even before the podcast about your story of funding. And I think it's so impressive, and I think it's so important to highlight. So I know that you invested in your own business, and that's a lot what entrepreneurs do. So how did that feel when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm starting off and I'm going to be investing in my own business? That's a little bit about bootstrapping as well. But, how did that feel? How did you feel about that? And how have you been able to leverage that?
Well, let me tell you my story a little bit. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Actually, my grandfather came to Chile from Russia, but he arrived to Argentina, to Chile, and then he didn't even have a high school education, and he created a big department store. He died very young, and then my father, who was got an engineering degree, he got his PhD in Berkeley, had to come back from the end of the PhD to take care of the business because his father died. And my father took over the business and ran it more professionally. But then he died extremely young at the age of 48, again, another case. So my brother had to take over the business. Eventually, it went bankrupt, the business. But I inherited some money from my father, because of his death. And I always thought that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always thought I was going to go into a family business, but that didn't happen. And I always thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I couldn't find what moved me. really wanted to invest my life until I moved to Boulder. I tried different things and I got into a tech community. And finally, I tried different things, but I never risked my own money until I finally decided to go for the big risk. And I put a big part of my inheritance into a business and invested. And I feel like I was honoring my father and his family, who really the reason that I had achieved my education and success was because of their success as entrepreneurs.
That's amazing. I love how that is a story of family, of respect, of honor. I think that's so important in the Latino community.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in a way, I felt very similar to the community because I grew up in Chile and my father had gotten education as an engineer, but I didn't have anyone in my family that were lawyers or other type of professionals. And I went to law school and I was number 50 in my class, graduated number 50 in my class, and I could hardly find a job when I graduated from law school in Chile because I wasn't from the Chilean elite. My family were immigrants. My mother from Romania, my grandmother from Greece, my father, again, second generation from Russia. And so it wasn't like we had a great network in the more traditional professions. I feel very, very similar to the Latinos here that are starting. They might have families that are successful owning a small business, but they don't have huge inroads in the professional networks or Silicon Valley, whatever you want, that type of network.
And how have you created your network?
That's a great question. I was fortunate enough that I arrived to the right place. I came to study at Harvard Law School, and I kind of like they are experts at creating networks, organized networks. When I took the bar, but I found my first job in New York, in part thanks to Harvard Law School network, in part helps to some networks in Chile. And then Boyce, the first law firm I worked in New York, is called Boyce and Plimpton. They had an incredible system of networks. They would send you their annual kind of book with all the addresses of all the former employees of the law firm and where they were now and all that. And so that's how you really switch jobs. Like you would call the former, employees, and they're called alumni of the law firm, and you will call them and they will connect you. And so I learned very early on how you create networks in the United States. I also realized that very early on, when I started doing more entrepreneurial work in Boulder, that I gave a lot. I gave a lot. And then I created a lot of goodwill from people. So I realized that, in order to create a network, you have to give first, but give it without any expectation of return, really no expectation whatsoever. It might pay, it may not pay off, but you have to be very open. And I was very open like that. I was very kind of willing to give, to produce things, to do the work before any type of compensation or expectation that it was going to pay off. And I created networks that way.
Yeah, because it's hard to create a network from scratch, let's say. So I love that you were able to leverage what was given to you. Sometimes entrepreneurs don't do that as well as they should. It's like, okay, you're given some kind of list, or you have one connection. Well, leverage that connection and make sure that you do it from beginning to end.
I blame myself. I could have, I haven't done it as well as I could, So I tell you that I'm guilty of the same thing. It's easy to leverage a network when you're trying to sell somebody else or help someone else. It's harder to leverage a network for yourself when you think there's going to be a personal gain. And I think as Latinos, as women, we have that problem more ingrained than others. And I feel I'm guilty of that problem. I'm the first one to acknowledge it.
It is part of our culture. I'm Latina too, so Venezolana. That's something that we need to actually overcome and say, you know what, we are awesome individuals and we are worthy of this connection, and let's work together to create something bigger.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that our humbleness, or our obedience as a culture is so wonderful, it's so beautiful, but it's so harmful sometimes,
Yeah. So what are the things that have helped you kind of overcome that harmfulness? You already said that, you give without anything in return. What are the other things that you said, hey, you know what? I think that I've done that really, really, really good.
I think that I like to be measured by my results. And that's why I like to put myself in these entrepreneurial positions. Everything I do, from consulting, for any type of job that I've, done in the last 5 years, have been an opportunity to demonstrate a result. I think also when you're a visionary, it's a problem until you have a success or you have a result. No one really believes what you're doing. You're going to have a few people that believe in what you're doing. They're going to be your community. But until you really get to the level of success, of cracking the code of your vision, you're also going to be misunderstood by a lot of people. What I have done to create more networks is like I'm always trying to see how I can help other people, even when I'm very busy and when I'm feeling particularly down or not happy with myself. I try to see, how can I give? Because at the end of the day, it's the only thing that really makes me happy is to see that I am producing some value. The part that is not good is when you start feeling sorry for yourself and saying, well, I given all this and when it's my turn, that's a horrible thought. And immediately when I start thinking, when I have thought about those things in the past, I switch it to like give more. That's how I try to fix it.
And I think that with that giving more, you have had such a successful, let's say, measurable outcome of investors who are Latinas and Latinos really coming alongside you. Can you talk us through how that worked?
That was part of the early work I did. One of the things, for example, I met a woman that I love so much. Her name is Denise Rastauri, also an activist, a women, basically rights person, and also a journalist, and she writes for Forbes. We started collaborating on a series of articles that she was writing, and I came up with some concepts, and I helped her. And, we did that as a fun project, and it was her column. But because of that, I met all these amazing women that we were interviewing together. The series was called Self-Made Women Series. And I met one of my investors, Maria Green. I heard her story, and hearing her story as a Latina that made it from scratch to own this huge investment firm, I felt like she would understand my concept, BeVisible, and I pitched it to her, and she got it immediately, and she invested. So that's an example of something that I did, because I love the person that was doing these interviews, and it worked out for me. Another thing that I found my other investor, Latin investor, Maria Elena Lagomasino, who I adore to death. Maria Elena Lagomasino, who's on the board of Disney and Coca-Cola, who owns a family office that basically has 70 families with $50 million and up. She's someone that, how could I access a person like that in my network, right? I organized a concept for the National Center for Women and Information Technology. I proposed to them that they should reach out to the Latino demographic. So I created the whole campaign called Tecnolochicas. We ended up partnering with Televisa Foundation. Now it's a huge campaign. To kick it off, we did an event in Washington, and we invited the most important Latinos that could be a supporter to this campaign. Maria Elena was one of the people we invited. She never came. She couldn't come. But I heard about her name, that she was amazing, someone that I should connect with. And I kept her on my list. I emailed her and I gave her updates. I wanted her to be an advisor, to be visible. And one day she said, Andrea, let's have a Skype call. I said, can I go visit you? She's like, let's have a Skype. I told her, the concept. I pitched her. She said, no, I'm not going to be an advisor. I'm going to be an investor. And that was it. And from then, she's been one of the most incredible resources for BeVisible. And again, we then met in person, like not that long ago, and persistence. And she's like, you know what? I like your persistence. You have emailed me all these months, and I kind of see your vision. And then she was also friends with Maria Green, which I had no idea. So she checked with her, and she's like, I'm in.
I love that. I talk a lot about that there's always a personal connection between an entrepreneur and an investor. And some people think that that's kind of wishy-washy. What is that? That's kind of like a soft story or soft skill to have. But I think that this is a great example of you had a great pitch, you pitched it to the right people, and you had a personal connection with them.
Yeah, so that was at the early on in BeVisible, and I think I was very lucky with the investors at the beginning were coming because the people that really connected to this idea were really amazing. And so I have a community of investors that is to die for. One of my investors also is David Cohen, the CEO of Techstars. I have amazing people in my investment. Arlen Hamilton from Backstage Capital. Amazing people in my early investor group. I think going to a next level, has been a little bit harder for me because it has required me to get out of the comfort zone because I'm not finding all these super sympathetic, kind of faces, but more the people about the money. Like, how am I going to get my return on the investment? And that has been more difficult for me to crack in the sense of learning to speak that part of the language of the investment world.
But you got it at the beginning. So that's really great to have that. And that persistence as an entrepreneur really carried you far. Yes.
And it's a learning process. That's what I want to also convey, that, even when you think that I've been successful, I don't, I judge myself differently, that I don't think I have been that successful. I could have been more successful given the opportunities and the connections I have. And, but it's just how it is. We're learning here.
Well, that's a very female trait. So don't beat yourself up. You've done an amazing job of connecting, not just, people on your network and people to, come to your platform, but to connect all of these investors together.
Thank you. It is my intention that I create a community as well.
Wonderful.
People that care about this.
Yeah, and I think that that's very important to me as a Latina because we know the numbers, 2% of principals at venture capital firms are African American or Latino. And then on the other side of the venture table, about the same percentage, 1 to 2% of all Latino-owned businesses created venture funding, or angel investing. So, we really need to activate and keep those angel investors interested in smart startups like yours.
I think, it's very interesting what you say, because I'm dying to become an angel investor, because since I am sort of surrounded by entrepreneurs, I see them in action. I would know so well in who to invest, and it would not be about the business at all. I mean, if I had to invest as an angel investor, the business idea would be a consideration. It's the people. I've seen these people in action, that their tenacity against all odds. Some of the entrepreneurs that I admire the most in my community of entrepreneurs are single mothers. They're like really have put everything at risk for the business. Of course, I would invest in them. They're so invested in their success, and so that's why other people don't see that. They don't see it.
And I think that that's why your investors invested in you.
Probably. Very much. I think they invested in me. They like the business idea. They like the concept. They thought I was doing something important, but I think they invested in me. Yes, I agree.
I don't know them, but I agree. I know that that's what happened. So
maybe this is a question for you. And can I ask a question?
Of course. I love this.
As an investor, this is a great question. So it's true. We invest in the people, right? I would invest in the people. But what about then at the next level? So how do you, when you for example, when you're talking to venture capital, how do you even get these people to know you and to think that they would invest in you? Don't they invest in the actual business case and not in you?
Well, it all depends on the stage of the business. So I'm an early stage investor, and I kind of stay in that quadrant of funding. And for me, the connection that I have with the entrepreneur is incredibly important, because really it's about tenacity. It's about execution. It's about coachability of that startup. That's more important in those early stages to really grow that founder and grow that idea into the marketplace that it should go into. Of course, I do take into consideration the product and also the product market fit, right? And making sure that that product is set for excellent adoption for the consumer. So I always ask the same questions. Okay, founder, I love you. You're so passionate, because every single entrepreneur is passionate. But have you talked to a customer? Oh, okay, you have. What did they say? How many customers did you talk to? Okay, if it's a B2B business, have you talked to that business? Have you talked to them about what their needs are in the platform that you're creating? Okay, you have? Perfect. Okay, will they buy? Will they buy? Will they give you $1, the quote unquote dollar to buy that product? And then say, okay, well, what is the market size? Okay, the market size is pretty big. It could be niched, but at the same time, is that product market fit really important? So we talk about all of that, but that process of that founder talking about all of that and making sure that I'm de-risked of my investment in this person, at the very early stage, we talk about that, how they talk about it, how they go about with their customer interactions, how do they come to me with data. That is all the process of investing in that person. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for answering the question, because I think it's interesting. I'm not a professional investor, so I wonder how that relates.
And I think that that's one of the reasons why your investors invested in you, because they saw a tenacious woman. They saw another Latina. That's very important, because there's research out there about pattern recognition. Males invest more readily in another male because two things. One is they see their younger self, and two, they see the successful image that they have of a startup like Mark Zuckerberg, they see that example in their head. So they invest in a male. It's just the biases that are out there. So
Exactly.
the women Latinas that invested in you, that is huge. That is a huge connection. So I really want to dive into that because that's so important. That uniqueness of what you have as your board, as the people who support you is so important. So what other things have they been able to connect you to or mentor you through this process? Not just the money, but the mentorship that they've given to you.
Especially Maria Elena Lagomastino and Maria Green as well at the beginning. She was amazing and really was a huge ambassador for me. Because without Maria Green, for example, I wouldn't have received the investment of Maria Elena Lagomastino, to be honest. So one thing is to be an ambassador. So they become your ambassadors, and that's incredible. Mel has always been she's always is there to listen and to take a call, as well as Maria. But so every time I call her and I tell her, look, this is what is happening. This is what I'm not doing well. And she just will give me one bit of, it's not like a lot, but she just listens, right? And she's like, okay, so this is what you should focus on, And so she sends me, and this is what I can help you with. I think I have become much more precise about my needs. So at the beginning, I would just tell them what's going on with BeVisible, but I would not ask for any particular help because it was so big what I was trying to do that I didn't even know what to ask for, right? It was so huge. And now that I've gone into kind of the next level, I can ask particular things. Like now, Mel, I talked to her today, and Mel, I need more access to capital. That's what I need. So she's like, now, okay, send me your latest pitch deck, and we're going to make introductions, But I also think that she's also grown with me in the company, that she now believes in that she's opening also her network to make, but she probably didn't think I was ready for introductions before, but I also actually wasn't asking for them either. So I wasn't obviously ready for the next level, right? So she's like, so what are you going to use the money for? I'm like, this is what I'm going to use the money for. So you think that the only thing that is stopping you from where you are to success is money at this point? And I'm like, yes. But I wouldn't have been able to answer that like that before. I didn't ask for money or I didn't ask for introductions before because I didn't know if that was true. And now I know that the only thing that is stopping me from achieving what I want is more money. So I'm like, okay, what I have to do is expand my network. And I have people, so I'm now asking. So it's basically being there with you and being patient with you. They're patient, They're patient. They're understand that you're going through this. They also have been entrepreneurs in their own businesses. So I think what they provide me is this reassurance that, Andrea, you're going the right, be patient, and we're in this together.
Yeah, I think that that's something that I see as myself as an angel investor. I am in the same boat, the same path to success with that entrepreneur. So we really want to walk alongside you and make sure that you are on the right path. And we're kind of like that back pocket strategist for the CEO.
Exactly. At one point, she said, for example, Mel said, let's do an advisory board meeting. So we did. We introduced all the advisors and investors. It was a little bit crazy because we had a lot of people in the call. There was a lot of craving of our investors and advisors to connect to each other because we have a group of amazing people. So once I have more funds and more time, I would like to, to have this community kind of connect in a more structured way.
Well, I think that that's why I really think that you bring so much value to even your own angels, is that you're connecting these angels that might not be connecting to each other is so important. And that's how you're going to build your network. So you as the aspiring angel investor will be really ready for that success in your professional life.
Hopefully. And a good example of this is our friend that introduced us, Regina. She's also kind of doing the same in that investing in other people and sort of networks. And I think that this strategy is not, I did it because I like people, but actually I think it's probably the only way that it works, right? I mean, a meaningful network, a community.
Exactly. I think that that's so important. So anything else that has come up with that interaction between those investors and you that you would like to kind of dive into? Why is it so important for that connection between Latina and Latina across the venture table?
Because basically, all your investors will ask you, who are your Latino investors? Because, I mean, you're doing a Latino product and you are Latinos. So if you don't have the support from your own community, they won't support you. Or not they won't, but it's harder to make the case. So I think the investment of your own community first in you, like you get your family and friends, right? Then you get, sort of the Latinos, where the angels are Latinos, which is, so all these things build up so that the next level can invest in you. In other words, you can go from 0 to 100 without going through your community.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think that for Latino or Latina investors, that's very important too, is creating that community amongst themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I think people are looking at me from various different sources to do. Unfortunately, I'm so busy still trying to build my company and raising the money and all that stuff. But I think that there's a lot of craving to build a bigger investor Latino community in the United States. I don't think there's anyone kind of taking that actively kind of organized, bring all the Latina investors together.
Yeah, and I think that you're bringing an amount together. And what do you think, like as a visionary, because you are a visionary entrepreneur, and your background in the government and being a lawyer and just doing an amazing stuff, what do you see as going forward? Can we help each other out to raise more Latina angel investors?
Absolutely, we can definitely connect all the ones that are working on this right now, and maybe have sort of a brainstorming session, a meeting. There's a huge need for that, and I think it will be extremely beneficial for the Latino entrepreneurs to have that done. I think the women in the Latino culture also are the leaders. So once the men see a women in our own culture kind of taking a step, they will want to support their women, very much like that. So men will join to in this movement. I feel Latino men will join, Latino angels will join the women. Also shows that we know the Latino culture is a culture that is seen as chauvinistic, but I think it's a culture where women are very strong and have a lot of power and influence in their men. So it's kind of strange, right? It's very feminist in a way at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I see too is that we have a huge growing population of Latinos. I mean, the U.S. Census Bureau estimates 28% of Americans will be Latino by 2050. So, I mean, there's a rising number of Latinos, and we're obviously going to get a rising tide of Latino entrepreneurs. So that's one thing that
Yes,
I see
huge.
as a Latina investor. I'm like, I'm going to see more startups that are founded by Latinas.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and that's what I love. I love that you're doing that, and you're encouraging others to also take the same path that you are.
This is definitely a trend. I see it on the platform on BeVisible. There's so many young aspiring entrepreneurs. They all have jobs and a side hustle. They're kind of their startup, and they're all trying to connect, and it's wonderful. I see it, and I see it every day.
When
All sorts of businesses: food, fashion, tech, everything.
what have been like some of them that kind of stand out to you on the Be Visible platform that are that side hustle? Because that's kind of exciting to see what's coming through the pipeline.
Oh, there's so many. I know several that have adventure types websites, adventure travel. That's a huge one. I know, well, we just hosted an event in LA with a woman that created a beer, a Latino beer, tamarindo beer. Like, it was amazing. So she has already succeeded with her business. Doña Neta is called the beer, Doña Neta, Jessica Fierro. But then there's, like, for example, there's an employee at Disney that is part of the platform, but she also has product, kind of a physical product. So she asked me to introduce her to any other Latin entrepreneurs that have created physical products. And I did introduce her. I knew two of them, and I introduced them to two of them that have succeeded in their products. One that created a thing called Revolar, which is like sort of alerts you if someone wants to rape you. And it's a super, super cool device. Or ones that have financial services products. There's so many of them in the platform. There's so many of them. Yeah, it's a huge part of the community.
And I think that's so important that you're connecting all of those entrepreneurs, those young entrepreneurs. I call them young entrepreneurs just because they have young startups, because they will be successful. And then they will be like you're teaching them to give back, to collaborate. And when they make it big, they will feel like they need to give back to their community and then become angel investors. That's what we hope for.
Absolutely. There's also, some other avenues that we're even exploring, which are like crowdfunding and things like that to help the community give and invest. So definitely things that we're going to be exploring for BeVisible as well.
Yeah, because I think that that's something that it really needs to happen. We just talked about right now on the podcast is like, we need to connect everybody. Well, we're not all connected. So BeVisible might be that platform that says, hey, you know what? There are some amazing Latina startups that need funding. And here's an easy way to fund them is through crowdfunding or, investing them through an equity deal.
One thing that is obviously after this call, Sylvia, is that we have to connect you to all the others that I know, because I think you could be a good catalyst for this community.
Honored that you said that. I always want to be a catalyst and really be able to connect good people together that have a vision of something bigger, that are full of integrity. That's definitely what I'm aiming to do. So thank you for that. That's exciting. So any other things that are coming through the pipeline of BeVisible or what you're doing that we need to highlight during our last couple of minutes?
I don't know if I can say this because it's illegal, but we're always interested in meeting more investors. But we are working with more companies. We are also very involved with the DACA issue and starting to work with some organizations to address and give Latinos a voice in that. We're not afraid of politics at BeVisible because we feel it's part of the integral part of basically our financial success to have a voice in what's happening in the country. And we have a position. A community is a community that is willing to invest in each other's success. So I think that's kind of the spirit of the millennial generation in general. Very collaborative, very much this giving first thing. They know it is in their bloodstream. It's more like the older people that have traveled with this concept. We need to kind of receive education from the younger people, I feel.
I love that. And you're bringing them all together to make an impact.
Hopefully, yes. Hopefully we can create a bigger and bigger impact.
Perfect. So in the last couple minutes, I have a rapid fire final 4 questions. They're pretty easy. Number 1, it's what's your favorite, I would say angel investing resource, but what maybe as an entrepreneur and aspiring angel investor, what have you found has really helped you with that funding challenge and success actually that you've had?
Well, at the beginning, I used a lot of Twitter. I feel like a lot of investors are on Twitter a lot. I got tired of using it, to be honest. I did find a lot of people through Twitter, Medium as well.
Perfect. I love that. Nobody has actually said that. So that's very exciting. I use Twitter a lot too to find the outliers,
Yes.
Number 2 is what's your favorite book?
Oh, that's a great question. I like Gabriel Garcia Marquez's books, and Loving the Times of Color is my favorite. These days, I'm reading a lot of self-help book and Buddhism book, and one of the ones that I love is called The Untethered Soul.
Wow, that's awesome. I love those. And then number 3 is who has been a major influence in your life?
Ooh, there's a lot of people, but I think my mother. My mother has been the major influence in my life because she was an immigrant in Chile, and she raised me with kind of different values, more kind of, she never worked for a living, but she was very empowered herself and a feminist. So I don't know, she gave me all these things, a lot of contradiction there, but she did power me from very early on. So I think that I'm pursuing what I'm pursuing and dreaming big, I think has all to do with her.
Very insightful. Love that. Number 4 is what does abundance mindset mean to you? So living abundantly.
Abundance mindset is what I strive for every day. And when you start getting petty, like, I'm not getting my share, that's where everything starts to fail. So I think abundance mindset is the most important aspiration that we can have as entrepreneurs. It's really hard to achieve when you had issues in your childhood, or the privations that came from before. I was lucky enough that I had a very abundant childhood, and so I always revert back to my childhood when I'm feeling that I don't have enough. I try to think that I actually always had enough when I was young, and I felt that way. So, but it's very hard. It's by abundance mindset is really trusting the universe, trusting yourself, trusting others, hoping for the best, and sort of not attaching to anything, trying not to attach to a result, attach to a situation, attach to a thing, a deal. Really hard thing, very, very hard to practice and to. Thank you for that question. It's kind of what I try to do every day.
And that's why I ask it all the time, because that's one of my favorite things. I always live abundantly. It means something to me, but it means very different things to different people. And I just love how everybody has their view and their hue of what that looks like.
What is yours? What is yours?
Oh, thank you. Nobody's asked me that, actually.
I would love to hear.
I live full of integrity. And I mindfully do everything. So if I hang out with my kids, it's mindfully crafted, even though it's like maybe just a hangout session. It's really important. I want to be present, so that present living is very much of abundance. Is not just, okay, what am I to do? What's this? It's presently living in life, and then always looking at that vision. Why am I doing this? How will this be part of this abundantly living life that I'm creating with my family, and even with my colleagues? I always say, how can I help you? How can we do something bigger? Have you thought bigger? Have you thought about your impact? That's what I always look after. So that's what abundance mindset means to me.
Wow. No, and I think as women, we have an issue with thinking big, and I think it's important so this abundant living and thinking is also a thing that we can educate ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Kind of learn.
Yes. And and this is a important question to me as an investor, because the bias is, you have abundantly. And some investors who have, or some people who have lots of money, do not live abundantly, because they're like, okay, we're going to do the stock market, I'm going to do this. Well, investing in a startup is thinking bigger than yourself, is thinking about impacting the startup community. So that's why I love to ask that question, because that's why angel investors are doing what they're doing. They're trying to impact something. So that abundance is not money. Its abundance is of thinking, of growing a community. So that's another reason why I asked that question.
It's a great question.
So thank you so much, Andrea. It has been a complete pleasure to talk to you and learn so much about BeVisible and you in general, and your rise to being a successful CEO and startup.
Thank you for your words and for your investing in me and having me in your your circle and in your podcast. And I know this is time, and you're doing this altruistically for our entrepreneurs. And so thank you for what you're doing, building this community.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to and subscribing to the She Invest podcast. Go on over to sheinvest.com for the full show notes for this episode, as well as any resources, websites, and opportunities mentioned during the show. Sign up for the sheinvest.com newsletter to learn about events like our annual Hera Venture Summit during the month of September and our She Invests monthly investor circles. Thank you for your time, talent, and treasure.